A lot of this research can be really exciting. As scientists, we often have to go into the field, get our hands dirty, and do a lot of pretty extreme work, really. I mean, the work that we're doing here with Goliath Grouper requires that we're diving down to 100, 130 feet, 30 plus meters, and we're also going way offshore. We're doing this work right now because it's a really critical time for Goliath Grouper. There's been a lot of recent management decisions that have gone against some of the best scientific advice that's shown that there was originally from about 1990 when this fish was protected, and they started to show signs of recovery. And then about 2010, we've seen evidence that the population is not fully recovered and has started to decline again. And at the same time, the state has decided to open up a limited harvest for juveniles of the species.
There we go. Holy mackerel.
This is the hands-on part of research, and this is what really makes a difference for informing management and collecting data that's so important and critical to understanding what these species are doing, what these populations are doing, and how they do over time. And so what we really need to do is create better data to support management decisions at this very critical time when there's a potential decline in the population of Goliath Grouper. So right now we're in the Florida Keys in Key West, and we're using this as our jumping point in order to hit these sites that are about 70 to 80 miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico that we're targeting as Goliath Grouper spawning aggregations. So here with me on the first part of the mission are Cody Mott, Lauren Tracy, and Camille Demare. So a spawning aggregation is when fish come together for the sole purpose of reproduction. And this can be, in some cases with Goliath Grouper, up to 100 individuals. With other species like Nassau Grouper, it can be like 10,000 individuals. So it's an incredible biomass of individual fish that come together from all over the place to specific sites so that they can reproduce. It's important to look at those specific time periods and aggregations because they're indicative of the population. They come together from all over the place, from other residential areas where these fish live, and when they come together at specific times of year and in specific locations, we can really get at some of the questions of populations and abundances. So when we get to our dive sites today, the first thing we're going to do is bring down hydrophones and attach it to the site so we can record Goliath Grouper sound production. And then two of us are going to bring down spear guns that are modified with applicator tips for the tags, and we're going to tag as many fish as we possibly can. So right now we're headed about 80 miles offshore to a region where we had previously been in about 2010, where we know that there was a spawning aggregation, and we're going to see if it still exists there. And our first stop in that region is an old Air Force radio tower that is one of many that is scattered throughout the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I'm using the air rig now, and it's going up to like 22.
There we go.
Yeah, we got it.
This is the hydrophone. This is what we'll use to record the sounds of spawning that Goliath Grouper make. So out here is the actual hydrophone. Inside of this is a recorder. And so we'll start this recording, and then this will all sit under the water. We'll hook it to the reef, and it'll stay on the site for 24 hours so that we can record the boom sounds that the Goliath Grouper make overnight, particularly around midnight to 3 a.m. in the morning. So we should be able to collect all that sound in here if it is indeed a spawning aggregation. They are making their sounds.
Oh, thank you. I have the extra one in here.
There's only one.
There's only one extra.
I thought you were okay. There we go. All right.
And so this is only hand tightened?
Yeah, just hand tightened.
Okay.
It'll be fine. All right, we got the dive date and site on here, so if you can film that really quick so we know on the GoPro. All right. 3 objectives in the water are to tag as many fish as we can for market recapture study, send out a hydrophone recorder so we can record any sound, any courtship sounds the Goliath Grouper are making to confirm or
or find out that there's no longer a spawning aggregation here. And then we'll also measure the size for population dynamics to know what the size distribution is of the fish on the site. When we're tagging fish, this is an applicator tip, these tags that we made. And then when we go to tag a fish, we'll pull the band back, and then we'll go right to the dorsal side of the fish. And the tag will stick out, and we'll have a tagged fish then.
All right, guys, it's go time. Let's get in the water. You ready? Woo! How we're going to collect these data are by diving on these actual aggregations. So we'll send divers in the water, and once we find these fish on areas and aggregation sites that we've known from the past, and also looking for new sites that might be new aggregations that we want to look at whether or not they've expanded, and we'll go down and we'll tag these fish underwater one day, and then the next day we'll go back and recount them, and that basically gives us a population estimate through mark and recapture. And the other thing we're going to do is listen to the sound that these fish produce. We're going to send down hydrophone recorders, which can record the sounds they're producing, and we know that they produce certain sounds during their peak spawning period, and we can record the sounds they make, which are very indicative of that heightened activity of reproduction. So they'll make these courtship sounds from about 0 to 60 hertz. Frequency is a very low frequency sound, and they make these at very rapid intervals when there's a lot of spawning activity. So we can basically use that as a proxy then for this being a spawning site or not. And if we don't hear these sounds, then we know it's not a spawning site. If we do hear these sounds, it is a spawning site. And so we can look at spectrograph data and listen to the sounds and really identify these sites as spawning sites. And what we know from the past is we have sites that we've identified at least 10 to 15 years ago, if not longer, as spawning aggregations, and we have some evidence now that shows that some of these sites that we before knew were spawning sites may no longer be. And the evidence from that is from fishermen or from studies that we've continued, and we look at things like the numbers of fish that are there. So in general, there's about 10 fish at a minimum on a spawning aggregation, up to the upper ends of about 100 fish. And we're talking small sites. These can be like artificial reefs, artificial structures like sunken ships, things that are man-made or natural reefs. And they have very specific frequencies at which they make their sounds, and it's very identifiable for this species. So we know Goliath Grouper are making these sounds different than other fish that make other sounds. And what a really interesting thing is that a lot of people don't know fish make sounds. It's called being soniferous. You think about like dolphins communicating in the water, right? They have these signature whistles, they can talk to each other. Well, fish can do that too. It may not be as complex, but they can communicate in a way for courtship behavior where they get together and it communicates, hey, we're on this site. So when we get to the sites today, we're going to swim down and we're going to look for the fish that we tagged yesterday. And as soon as we start seeing fish, we'll kind of like hover over the top and make sure that there are or not tags on them. So we're looking for the tagged fish, and then we'll take our slates and we'll mark which ones are tagged and untagged. All right, so we want to get in as many fish counted as we can. And we'll look under crevices, we'll have our lights on us. So we'll want to make sure that we're catching every single fish that's on the reef, right? So we'll look under, we'll all stay together, but we'll kind of, collectively just try to get all the counts. And then once we're done with that, we'll circle back around. Cam, you'll have the lasers. Yep. So you'll start to then measure all the fish with the lasers in the GoPro, right? So we'll swim around, and then Lauren and I will probably continue to count just to make sure we have accurate counts. And then we'll all surface after that, and we'll basically sum up all of our totals of the fish that we counted that were tagged and untagged. And then I can go back and put that into a formula of mark and recapture, and we can get an estimate of the population size. So 3 factors that have possibly caused their decline, even though they've been fully protected up until just recently, are the potential for poaching, which we know does occur on sites. We also know that there's a large loss of mangrove habitat, which is so essential for juveniles. And on top of that, we have environmental factors like red tide events, algal blooms, and mercury is a very high impact on these species because they're so long-lived and they grow so large and they're at the fairly top of the food chain. They accumulate a lot of mercury in their tissues, which affects not only the health of the fish, but also the reproductive output. Why don't we grab those 33 so we can use hers up? think on the pursuit we can put some of the noodles at the bow maybe and put some of the tanks up there might make sense.
Okay.
The
It
2-footers.
should be fine up there.
I want to see if the little ones can stand up.
Today, what we want to do is mostly tag the fish. Not everybody has to go all the way to the bottom. I mean, some of these sites are a bit deep, so people can hover up a bit. You know, the first site might be at about 120 feet. We'll go down, tag as many fish as we can with our limited bottom time, and then we'll come up. So that's pretty much it. That's the main objective. So 3, tag fish, measure fish, and record sound. Hydrophone recording. This is Chris. Should expect to see a spawning aggregation here. We know that it is one historically, and so we're going to go down and basically make sure that the numbers are there, and we'll drop our hydrophones to record courtship behavior and sound. All right, guys, let's start gearing up. Woo! Woo! We have anecdotal evidence in some of the sites that we're going to on this leg of the trip that some of the sites that we previously knew to be spawning aggregation sites, so these very important reproductive sites for the population, that they have potentially gone down in abundance to the point where they're no longer aggregation sites. So in one account we've heard from a fisher that where we estimated that this aggregation site had about 70 individuals before, which is a large aggregation site, a very important one, has potentially gone down to like 1 to 5 individual fish now, which would no longer function as a spawning aggregation site. And so we're expecting to go there as a hypothesis to test whether or not that anecdotal evidence is true. And that's part of the scientific process, is to look at what we have as a hypothesis and then we prove or disprove that. And on the East Coast, where we looked last year and we'll be revisiting this year as a long-term study, we've seen that they were declined on the East Coast, where a lot of the spawning aggregations are very close to the East Coast of Florida. Now we're going way far off on the West Coast of Florida into the Gulf of Mexico to see if those trends are the same in the Gulf of Mexico as they are in the Atlantic that we've been seeing. What we know from decades of research is that Goliath Grouper, they're a native species and they have a positive impact on ecosystems. So we know that they actually, through being ecosystem engineers, meaning they can modify habitat and create more habitat for species, they actually increase the diversity of other species and the abundance. And so they're overall a very positive thing to see on these reefs, and because they've shown abundance increases over years, we've actually been able to track that and record that. Yes, indeed, their very presence on these reefs after they were gone for so long is increasing the diversity and abundance of other species. So today we are going back to the same sites as we went to yesterday, right? You're looking for these things sort of, lining up off the dorsal side of the fish. So then the other thing that, Cammie will be doing today is measuring the fish. So be trailing behind us. We'll go ahead and she's going to be measuring the fish underwater. So you guys don't necessarily have to worry about that other than for Cammie, but know that that's the other thing. And then one of us will also grab the underwater hydrophones that we put down on each site yesterday too, and we'll bring that up at the end. That was the hydrophone that collected hopefully a lot of booming sounds from spawning Goliath Grouper.
60 here, 45.
Guys, I have a feeling we're going to be running into some weather today, so we're going to have to move pretty quickly on the water.
Thank you.
You can take this guy right here.
Keep changing the time zone. Chris, you got 36.
Right.
So Cammie's going to be using the lasers, measuring, and so she won't need a slate. She's not counting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the lasers. So it's a device to measure the groupers, the size of the groupers. So when I go down, I'm turning on the GoPro, and then I'm going to turn on this laser and this laser on, and I would hide the laser beams to not scare the groupers. And when I find one, I'm going to go as close as possible and perpendicular to the grouper, and I'm just gonna like uncover the lasers, and then that's gonna be recorded on the video, which we will later via software find out the measurement of the grouper.
Megafauna are often imperiled because they're slow growing and late to mature, and there's also not as many of them. They're not as abundant because they're the top of the food chain, and they're also very easy targets for a lot of hunters or fishers because they're so large and highly sought after for food. This is not only a problem in the United States. The species has shown some signs of recovery in the United States, but elsewhere throughout their historic range down to Brazil and throughout the Caribbean and even to West Africa, they have not recovered really at all. And in many cases, they're thought to be locally extirpated or extinct. And so in Florida, we really have a great opportunity to recover this species and to manage it well as to be an example for the rest of the world.
We going to that front cleat? And we hope you work and you don't get flooded. I was giving it a little pro talk. Yeah, so you can see here, all these peaks, those are booms.
Oh, yeah.
That's a boom. Once we start seeing the intensity of spawning behavior, it'll be like boom, 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 boom. All right, let's see this now.
Oh yeah, boom, boom.
That's what these peaks are here. Specifically, we're looking for the period from about midnight until 3 a.m. That's when that we've recorded previously, that's when they have peak spawning activity. So we're going to expect, as we keep looking through these videos at different sites and then listening to these sound recordings, that we'll see a lot of this intensity that'll happen. These booms that we're hearing now are going to be a lot more frequent at those periods, and you'll be able to see the wave frequencies increase. The ones that we saw before weren't booming at all.
Yeah, in Key West there wasn't any.
Exactly. So, a boat.
At what time?
2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Well, so that's what we used to identify poachers coming on sites too, and in protected areas. Not that it's illegal to come on these sites, but that's a boat motor. So
Yeah, it's weird.
kind of weird to be there at 2 and 3 in the morning, huh?
Exactly, yeah.
So we also recorded divers in the water
Yeah.
on our hydrophones at like 2 or 3 in the morning. On these sites, on these spawning aggregation sites.
We confirmed our time frames are correct for 2
We
a.m.
confirmed our time, so it wasn't us diving.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what do we make of that? I mean, people are
At
fishing
2
at
in the
night.
morning.
I mean, we can't say that they were necessarily poaching.
If you're going for a night dive, normally it's like you go right after sunset. So
You don't
that
go at
way
2 in the
You don't go
morning.
at 2 in the morning.
Exactly.
Unless you're doing something.
That you don't want
And
people
not
to
that
see.
far.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
know.
All right, let's take a look at the 360 camera footage now. It's kind of cool because we can see all around us, so even some of the things we maybe didn't see when we were in the water, this new technology allows us to sort of see all around and if we missed anything. All right, so you can see here, I was looking around inside the structure because it was pretty dark, and right there, that's Goliath Grouper. It's cool as you can look around all over and see if there's anything that we missed, right? Because the camera's recording everything, even though I'm looking forward and up. Oh, that's pretty awesome.
All the way.
Uh-huh.
All around.
Let's see. Oh, perfect, right on. So that was the perfect way to laser measure a fish. And so, of course, our other objective that you were down there doing was to look at the size distribution of fish on all these sites. And so we'll look at these data later, right? We haven't gotten a chance to analyze the size, but we got some really good data collected. In this frame now, as we're taking the video, so we can basically, anytime we get these perfect shots on like that, we can use this still and use software basically to use knowing the distance between these 2 points, we can extrapolate and estimate the size of the entire fish. So this is perfect. We do this for every fish that we lasered. So after looking at all these data, we basically now found that there's a good indication that the numbers are definitely lower on all of the sites that we've revisited from previous years that were previously spawning aggregation sites that no longer are likely functioning as such. And then we also looked at some new sites that have potential for being spawning aggregations within that region. And although it looks like there is some potential for that, we are definitely at a point where, with the opening of a juvenile harvest, that it is definitely not a good idea to do it right now, given the lower numbers that we saw overall from this entire study. There were few fish at just about every site we visited.
If you would like to get involved in helping to protect the Goliath grouper, see our description below and sign the petition.